I knew this was going to happen, but I just didn't know it was going to happen this fast. Well, we just talked about in another video that Yuzu was being sued by Nintendo, and look, there's already been a judgment. Basically, I guess they settled out a quarter, whatever the case may be. But whatever's happening now, it's done. And Yuzu is done for now. And don't get me wrong, I believe that the emulation of the Switch will happen, which we'll talk about in a second. But as of right now, it is over. It's done with, and they basically have to pay $2.4 million in a settlement. And this one of the sad things about it is Citra, the 3DS emulator, is shut down as well because the same people who were a part of the Yuzu emulation was also doing the 3DS one, the Citra. So that is absolutely horrible. So there's been on Twitter, you can just go to Twitter and find out the post that Citra put up, or whoever running Citra put up. They said, today we write to inform you today that Yuzu and Yuzu's support of Citra is being discontinued, effective immediately. Yuzu and his team have always been against piracy. We started the projects in good faith, out of passion for Nintendo and its consoles and games. We were not intending to cause harm, but we see now that because our project can circumvent Nintendo's technology protection, yada yada yada. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing. You can read it. Just go to that. Matter of fact, I will leave the link down in the description so you can look at that quote right there. Also, I will put the PDF file of the actual uh lawsuit in the summary of it, of them losing, and well, actually have to settle and pay $2.4 million. I'll put that down so you can read all that as well. And what does this mean? It means that basically Yuzu got too greedy. The guy Citra, whoever did this, they got too greedy. Basically, what they did was they started this emulator, which it's not hard to emulate Nintendo consoles. I mean, let's be honest. Nintendo consoles outside of the N64 are like extremely easy to emulate. And what happened was they got too greedy with it and started with the Switch too early. Yes, the Switch now is what, 6 years old, but you also have to understand that it is still a very prominent console. It's their latest console for the company of Nintendo. They're still basically, supporting it. So with that being said, they're going to watch for anybody who's trying to make somewhat of a profit off of their current IPs at the very least. So what happened was they were getting games early because of piracy. And not only that, they were benefiting off of it with being behind a Patreon. And with that Patreon, they were giving people access of stuff like, let's say, for instance, if you need a update to fix the game to work in the emulator, like a patch or update, they were actually making patches and updates and make you pay for them behind the paywall. And not only that, early access of the updates of the actual emulator behind the paywall. You listen. If you're going to make an emulator, you have to do it like in the back, in the dark web, in the back shadows, just like the PlayStation 2 emulator, all these other emulators that are out now. They've been basically been on the low about it. They never had a money pipeline for you to necessarily do certain emulators. One that I can't remember. I can't remember a situation where there's been a pipeline to where you can have access to an emulator. That is absolutely wild. And not only that, games like not Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom that came out early, Metroid Dread that came out early, all these other games that came out early based on, people pirating these games and using them in Yuzu to see if they work early, like in some cases weeks early at a time, weeks before the game's release. That it cost Nintendo a lot of money. Like I heard somewhere like Tears of the Kingdom was like $1 million, not $1 million, but 1 million downloads of that game used for Yuzu. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of hit that Nintendo had to take. So when they went after them, it was primarily because of that. I don't think they necessarily had much on the emulator. I mean, I didn't read the summary, beyond not all of it anyway. So I don't know. So with that being said, the emulation part of these consoles aren't necessarily illegal. I mean, that's been, judgment's been on that for other emulators back in the past. The problem is when you have a situation where you're paywalling these emulators, and on top of that, you're providing, customer support basically for updates on games. I remember like when I was looking at Yuzu one time, they were doing one for they were doing updates for Bayonetta 3. They were doing updates for, like I said, Metroid Dread, or I remember watching them do it. I'm sitting back here like, yeah, because I was like really close to thinking about trying it, because at the time I didn't have a Switch. My son didn't have a Switch, and I was not a big fan of playing games on handheld, or buying a Switch in general. So I was like, maybe I'll try it. So I looked into like the Discord or whatever the case may be, and that's when I saw like, wow, that is a lot of people in this Discord downloading these, downloading updates for these games. So was a really big deal. These guys made almost $30,000 a month, or $30,000 a month plus, for this emulator. That is absolutely insane. Last but not least, I'm going to talk about the Citra. Citra had nothing, Citra had nothing to do with this, what was going on. And basically they caught a stray. It was a 3DS emulator, which, I'm starting to get kind of fond of the 3DS, because I've seen some of the games that are on there that I actually want to try, like Mario Kart 7. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't even think about Mario Kart 7 being on a handheld. I just thought Mario Kart Wii was 7. I mean, that just goes to show you how bad I'm not cool with emulator. I mean, not emulators, but handhelds. But I want to try it. But now I'm probably just gonna buy me a 3DS. I mean, why not? I mean, I buy pretty much anything else I want. And another thing, I do have most of these emulators. I don't have a Yuzu. I never thought about getting Yuzu, to be honest. But I have most of these older emulators just for preservation purposes. I barely use them, but they're on my computer. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these emulators are basically, out of date at this point. But nevertheless, 3DS, I heard it was a really good emulator, and these guys basically, shot that in the foot because of what they've done, and it's really disheartening. I mean, at the end of the day, you would want to have some form of preservation of some of this stuff. Yes, there's millions of these consoles out there. There's millions of these handhelds out there, but to have an emulator just in case, that's always a good thing. I've been trying to find my way around, trying to get some form of consoleization of any of these things. And this is one of them that I did get. And I know a lot of people may not be a fan of it, but since I got it here, I'll talk about it. I have this Retron Cube thing that does, what is this? It's a Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. Because I'd rather play these games on the TV at the end of the day. But nevertheless, this is really, disheartening. It really is, because now what happens with emulation going forward? Do Yuzu or do a Switch emulator come back? I think it will in a later time. I believe that, like I said, I think they started this too early. They really did. What they should have done is basically wait. And I know some people don't like to wait. If this emulator came out like, like 4 years later down the road, we probably wouldn't be talking about this. I know Nintendo tried to go after, the Dolphin emulator at the time, the Wii U emulator, but they don't really talk about those anymore. Super Nintendo emulator, all that stuff is out there, but they don't go after them. But just the fact that the Switch is still their prominent console, you're going to get in trouble. Somebody's going to go after you, because that's their money maker right now. You can't get into the bottom line. Like right now, nobody's checking for a GameCube emulator. I mean, I doubt if they're going to go after it in a lawsuit. I know Nintendo's aggressive, but it gets to a point where, is it really worth it? Because they're not making money off of it anyway. So with that being said, it's like, we'll see what happens. I think down the road, you will get another emulator for the Switch. I mean, easy. You'll get one easy. It's just going to be somewhere that I'll say the next 3 years, you'll get another one. Somebody will pop their head up and drop one. But I think it'll be more behind the scenes this go around. And that's a good thing. It needs to be behind the scenes, because this stuff is like way out of hand when it's trying to. We have a Patreon and all this other stuff. That's kind of wild. So I'm going to get out of here. I will see you guys on the next one. Y'all take it easy. I'm out. Peace.